Hello and welcome to Bite My Pie. Today we're going to look at NAS or Network Attached Storage. This is a great way to share documents, videos and music all around your home to any device you own, be it a PC, laptop, tablet or even a smartphone. To do this we'll be using some free and open source software called openmediavault or OMV for short. So if you'd like to learn how to do this, stick around. Network attached storage can be set up to be accessed anywhere with an internet connection, but for the purpose of the video we're going to focus on implementing it on our local network, which then, providing you've got reasonably good Wi-Fi, should be available throughout your home. Not only is this more secure, it's also easier to get up and running. With that said, let's dig in. Okay, first things first, let's fire up a web browser. And we're going to search for openmediavault, and here we go. So it's www.openmediavault.org, and on the website homepage we're going to go to the download tab, and if we look on the download page under the ISO section, we've got the installation images can be found here. So if we click on the here, and then that takes us to SourceForge, which is hosting the download images, and you've got this nice big green button here, download latest version, which at the time of this recording is 5.3.9. so if we click on that and just wait for it to count down from 5. And there we go. Okay, so when the downloads prompt pops up, we can save that into our downloads folder and click save. And there we go. So it's 559 meg. So that'll just take a few minutes. So I'll pause the video and come back once it's downloaded. So we've now got the ISO of openmediavault downloaded onto our PC. So if we come out of the web browser, let's go and have a look at it. So open File Explorer and go to Downloads, and there it is. Now that we've got the software, we're going to put it onto a USB stick. So to do that we need some more software. So if we relaunch the web browser, and this time we're going to search for Etcher, and it's this one, etcher.io. so if we click on that, that takes us to the website, and this green box here should have auto detected your operating system. If it didn't get it right, you can click the download and choose it manually, but for us that's good, Windows installer. So I'm going to click that and save it again to my downloads folder, and I'll just come back in a second once we've got that. Great, so now we've got Etcher as well, so we can come out of the web browser again, and my downloads folder is still open, so you can see I've got the openmediavault and I've got the Etcher. So it's time to install Etcher first, so let's double click that, and we'll go through the wizard, first clicking the agree button, and here we go. So Etcher is now installing, and here we go, and it's even launched the software for us, which is good. So I'm going to close out of File Explorer. In fact, I'll close out of Etcher as well, just to show you how you get back to that, because it's not actually put a desktop shortcut on there for us. So if we click the start menu, and you can see it's already come here under B because the company behind it is Bellina, so it's under B for Bellina Etcher on the start menu, or if you didn't see it you could type Etcher into there and it should, oh no, my mistake, Bellina Etcher, that's better, and it brings it up for us, and we can click the button and it will launch the software again for us. There we are. Okay, so let's put our USB stick into our computer. I've got a Kingston 16GB memory stick. 2GB is probably enough, but you've most likely got one bigger than that anyway. This is going to create the installation media for our openmediavault NAS box. So pop that in and then click this blue select image button, and we're going to browse to our downloads folder and the openmediavault image that we downloaded a moment ago and click open. And once you've done that, you can click flash and yes to that, and it's now going to copy openmediavault, as I say, the installation media, onto our memory stick. So I'll fast forward the video rather than making you wait for it, and we'll come back once it's complete. And there we go. So we can now close out of Etcher, and the program was good enough to unmount our USB stick for us, which if we check in File Explorer we can see that under this PC it's no longer there. So we can now physically take the USB stick out of our computer. So before we begin the actual installation of openmediavault, let's just have a quick word about how the software works. Now, you could install it from the memory stick onto a computer hard drive, but I would suggest not doing that for the reason that openmediavault doesn't need a lot of space, and if you install it onto a hard drive it will take over that drive. So in other words, you won't be able to use that hard drive for storing your data, which is the whole point of a NAS box. So rather than do that, and what I'm going to demonstrate in this video is we're going to install it to a USB stick, and then the operating system, the openmediavault software, will run off of that stick. So you'll leave that plugged into the NAS box all of the time, and what that does is frees up the internal bays, the hardware bays in the NAS box for fitting physical hard drives to put your data on. So thinking a bit more about the hardware for this, what could you actually use? Well, ideally you want something that's relatively low power, so think about the processor, maybe go for an Atom or something low powered, so it doesn't use much electric, because obviously the whole point of a NAS is, being a mini server, you're going to effectively leave it running 24/7, so think about the power considerations of that. Also, you want an enclosure, a case that's capable of taking more than one hard disk, possibly the more the better. It depends how much data you want to store in there. Over the long run it can be handy to have the facility to upgrade it and add more as you go along. So what about the amount of RAM? Well, the openmediavault website tells us that the minimum is 1 GB, which again I would recommend that you go for a bit more than that. So long as it's got at least 2 gig of RAM, possibly even 4, that should be fine. So when thinking about the hardware for our openmediavault NAS, you could build one from the ground up if you felt confident, so go out and source the parts and put one together from scratch. You could potentially repurpose an old computer. You could buy a suitable PC. So there's even companies out there that will build one for you to the spec that you require. That's if you can't find or see anything suitable available off the shelf. Bear in mind, whatever computer you're going to use for this, you don't need to pay for an operating system, for example Windows, because we won't be using that. Obviously we'll be installing openmediavault onto it instead. openmediavault can even be installed on a Raspberry Pi, although that would take a little bit of DIY to produce a suitable enclosure and connect everything together and power. Also, the Pi uses what's known as ARM architecture rather than the x86 of a traditional PC. So in the first instance that might not be the best route to take. But the beauty of it is OMV is flexible enough to install on pretty well whatever you like, so decide what would work best for you and then go from there. So let's briefly sum up the NAS hardware configuration. We want 2 USB sticks, one for the OMV installation media that we've already created earlier, and as we said that needs to be at least 2 GB in size. We want another USB stick which preferably will be 16 GB or bigger, and this is for installing openmediavault onto, so it will act as our little hard drive for openmediavault. We need 2 GB or more of RAM. Then next we ideally want a low power CPU or central processing unit. Then we need the computer to have at least 2 USB ports, preferably USB type 3, as openmediavault will run off one of these. The computer also needs to be capable of booting from a USB stick, but practically anything built in the last 5 years should be fine. And then finally we want a computer case with at least 2 physical bays to hold the hard drives, ideally more to allow for future expansion if needed. So for the purpose of this video I'm going to be demonstrating everything in a virtual environment. Now it makes no difference if you're following along. Everything I do you can do with real hardware and it should perform exactly the same. So for this demonstration we're going to have our 2 memory sticks. The first one is going to have the openmediavault installer on it, ready to boot from and install. The second one is obviously what we're going to install the openmediavault software onto, which the NAS will run from moving forwards. For the video I'm going to have 2 hard drives inside the NAS box, and the reason for this is we're going to use RAID 1. Now don't worry about the technical term, all that means is that it's going to copy the data from one of the drives onto the other automatically, so that if at any point either of the hard drives were to fail you won't lose your data, and then you could get a replacement hard drive, put it into the openmediavault NAS and rebuild the RAID array so that it's protected again. Okay, enough of the preparation, let's get going. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is take the USB stick that we've set up the OMV installation media onto and plug that into your NAS box. Now I would suggest if the computer has got front USB ports, use those for that, because it's a good idea to take the second USB stick that we're going to install OMV onto, that's going to act as our small hard drive, and plug that in the rear of your NAS box stroke computer, because then it's just nice and tidy and out of the way, because it's going to stay in there permanently. We're then going to turn the NAS box on, and we need to get it to boot from the USB stick. So to do that we need to get into the BIOS, or what's now known as the UEFI settings. Now unfortunately not all computers are the same. You will need to keep tapping a key on the keyboard from the moment you turn it on to get into that BIOS. Now the delete key is a popular one, but as I say, different computers can have different keys to do this. If you look at the screen, if you're fast enough to read it, it quite often pops up telling you what the key is to get into that computer's BIOS settings. So whatever it is, tap that key repeatedly until you're in there, and once inside the BIOS you need to search for the boot order. So locate that, and then again this varies. If you've got UEFI on your computer, You can even use your mouse to point and click your way around, otherwise you're going to use the cursor keys and the keyboard to do it on the older BIOS setups. Either way, get to the boot order and follow the prompts that usually appear on the screen to change it. Make sure that it's the USB stick with the OMV installation media that we created earlier on it that's set to boot first. Then set your other USB stick that we're going to install openmediavault onto to boot second. This way you won't need to return to the BIOS and change the boot order later. When you've done this, save and exit the BIOS. Okay, so if you're seeing this screen, you've successfully booted the computer into the openmediavault installation. And we've let the automatic countdown on the boot menu begin the installation, which brings us to this first screen. Right, so the first step is to choose the installation language, which is already on English, so I can press enter. And now we need to pick our country, so for me that's the United Kingdom, and press enter again. And now we're going to choose our keyboard, so mine is British English, and enter. And here we go, it's starting the installation and loading additional components. And now it's detecting the network interfaces, and now it's picking up an IP address from our router through DHCP. So at this stage we just need to come up with a host name for our NAS, which the default, as you can see, is openmediavault, but that's a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to delete that and just call it OMV and continue. So now it wants us to give our NAS a domain name, which, as it suggests, could be something like .com, .net, etc. Because we're just going to use this on our local network, I'm going to keep it on the default local as it suggests, and press enter to continue. Next it wants us to come up with a password for the root account, which is the system administrator account. So we're not putting this on the internet, so it's not critical that we make it super secure, but it's up to you how strong you want to make it. So think of a good password and enter it in here and press enter to continue. And because we can't see what we type in, we just have to enter it again to make sure we've typed it correctly, and then press enter to continue again. Right, now if you remember, for this video we've actually got multiple storage devices connected to the NAS, so it can tell that that's the case here, and it's detected more than one storage device because basically we've got the two USB sticks, the one that we're installing OMV from, the one we're going to install it onto, plus the two hard drives that are going to be for our data as we set the NAS up. So on this screen just hit enter to continue. And here you can see it's not detected obviously the USB stick that I'm installing OMV from, but it has detected my simulated USB stick that I want to install it onto, which is that 32GB hard disk that it's listing at the top. That would be your USB stick. And then underneath that you can see I've assigned two 120GB hard disks to the NAS as well, which it has also seen. So for the purpose of this step we just need to select what is the USB stick that we're going to install OMV onto, which in this case is this top entry here. Okay, so it's going to carry out the bulk of the install now, which will take a little while, so I'll fast forward the video for this part and then we can catch up when it comes to the next prompt. Right, now at the end of that install it brings us to the configure the package manager stage. So here it asks us to choose our country so that openmediavault can go out and look for the servers for the updates and packages from the closest location to us. It's actually using Debian, which is the operating system that OMV is built on top of. So for me that's going to be United Kingdom, which is already selected, and I can hit enter, and now we just need to choose a mirror, which it says at the top. Usually deb.debian.org is a good choice, or certainly is for me. It's selected that, so I can hit enter again on that to continue. And now it's asking if we use a HTTP proxy, which I don't, and if you don't know what one is, then the odds are that you're probably not either. Certainly for a home network it's unlikely that you would be, so hit enter on that one, and it's configuring the package manager for us. Okay, so we'll skip ahead again now because there's nothing much to report at this stage of the installation. It is nearing completion now, and we'll come back when it reaches the end. Right, and that's it. The installation stage is complete. So if you've been following what I've been doing in the video, you can pull the USB stick out of the front of the NAS box. Be sure to leave the USB in the back, or wherever you put it, the one that we've installed OMV onto, obviously. And when you've done that, we can hit the enter key on here to continue, which is going to reboot OMV. And here it is restarting, so it's firing back up. And that's it. openmediavault is now up and running. Now if we just have a closer look at the information it's put on the screen for us, don't worry that it's text based, it's not that scary. If you look near the top where it says ENP0S3, that's actually the name of the network adapter in my computer. But more importantly, to the right of that, and you'll have something similar, it gives us the IP address. Now that's the IP that our DHCP on our router, it's the address that it's handed out to openmediavault. Now we'll deal with that in a little bit, but you just need to make a note of that for now because we'll need it shortly. Also note, it tells us that the web control panel, because we're going to do the setup and the configuration of openmediavault and indeed use it through a web panel. Now to get into that, as it tells us, you've got a username and password. Now by default that is admin, as it tells us there, for the username, and openmediavault for the password. Now we'll change them to something, or we'll change the password to something a bit more secure shortly, but again just make a note of those. Also worth noting in here is the fact that it tells us that we've got this command OMV dash first aid if we need to do a repair on the system from the command line, so that might be worth noting down as well. And then obviously it gives you the openmediavault website to go to for more information. So just very quickly before we do the setup, if we just log into this command line, this is where our root password that we set during the install comes in. So the username, we enter root here and press enter, and then the password, which hopefully you made a note of during the install, and that, as you can see, gets us logged in. Now this, if things really went badly pear-shaped, this is where you would enter that OMV dash first aid. You would come into this terminal as it's known, or command line if you'd sooner, and enter that command. Sorry, I need to add the aid on the end, and then press enter, and that gives us a whole host of options of things we can do to sort out OMV if things go wrong. I'm not going to cover that in this video, but obviously the openmediavault website and forums would be a good place to look. So we'll just come out of there for now and exit. And in Linux, because this is all Linux based, obviously you can type clear like so to get to a nice clear screen. It's like in the old days of DOS when you would type CLS to clear the last screen. And if we type exit, that brings us back to where we started at the logon part. So at this stage you can now turn off your monitor. You could even disconnect the mouse and keyboard from the NAS box. and the monitor as well, and run it what they call headless, because everything we do from this point will be through a more friendly web UI. In fact, you could relocate your NAS box to somewhere close to your router and then just have it connected through a Cat5 cable directly to your router and leave it on there, because obviously the nature of the NAS running as a mini server, so we can access our data on pretty well any device we like within the house. It's a good idea to leave the NAS box just running quietly in the background 24/7, so it's ideal really to have it located next to the router and then just leave it powered on there. Right, now if you remember, I said that the router had given us that IP address for our openmediavault NAS. Now that's all well and good, but because the router handed that out, it could unfortunately change over time, and because this NAS is effectively going to act as a mini server for us, we want to ideally set that up with what's called a static IP, so in other words it doesn't change. So to do that we need to log into our router. Now this is fairly straightforward. If we click on Start and type CMD for the command prompt and press enter, that will open up the command prompt window, and if we type ipconfig and press enter, that will give us the address of not only this computer, but it will also give us the default gateway. So that's this number here, 192.168.0.1 in my case. You need to make a note of what yours is, and when you've got that, we can open a web browser and we're going to type that IP address into the address bar of our web browser. So as I say, in my case that is 192.168.0.1 and press enter, and that brings us to the login screen of our router. So log in to your router. If you're not sure what the details are, it's usually written on the router itself, so you need your username and your password, and log into there. So once we're logged into the router interface, what we're looking for is our DHCP server. So in my case that's this one here, and if I look here I can see on this line here that it's giving out a range of addresses from 192.168.0.50 all the way up to 192.168.0.100. That's what's called the dynamic range, so it could issue an address anywhere between those two numbers to any device that connects to the home network. Now you've basically got two choices. You can set it up in your router so that the IP address of the openmediavault NAS is what they call reserved, so in other words it doesn't change, it keeps that address. What I prefer to do is set the openmediavault, the NAS box, up on a static IP address, so I'll actually set that within openmediavault. But what we don't want to do is have that static IP address overlap with the DHCP range. So you can see here the available range is 192.168.0.1 up to 192.168.0.254. That's the usable addresses in that range, so anywhere between 1 and 254. Now obviously the first number here ending in 1 is the IP address of our router, and the range is using up numbers between 50 and 100. So what I want to do is pick a number outside of this range but not the IP address of the router, because every piece of equipment has to have a unique IP address. You can't have two devices sharing the same IP address. So I want to pick a number outside of 50 to 100 but less than 254 and greater than 1. So I'm going to use 10 for the openmediavault. Now in your router, if your range, it might quite possibly take up most of, if not all of these addresses in that range. So what you'll want to do is change the range here, like I've done in this router, to just use a smaller amount of those addresses here. So you could do the same as me, where I've got allowed the 50 to 100 addresses to be issued by the DHCP server. So if you just change those to reflect the numbers you want in yours, just bear in mind that in this DHCP address scope or range, you need enough IP addresses to be available to cover the number of devices, well, to more than cover the number of devices that you're going to connect to your home network. Otherwise you'll have problems with devices not being able to connect because there aren't enough IP addresses. So when you're happy with your new range and you've decided on what IP address you're going to use for openmediavault for its static IP address, you can come down to the save button within your router interface and click that so that the settings take effect, and then we can exit out of the router and close that page. We can also exit out of the command prompt. Right, so let's open a web browser and fire up the openmediavault web interface. So if you remember, on mine the web interface OMV currently has an IP address of 192.168.0.54, and if I press enter, and here we are at the logon screen. And if you also remember, our username by default was admin and the password was openmediavault, so we can log into there, and we don't want to save that to Google Chrome. Great, so we're into the web UI or web user interface. So the first thing we want to do is, if we click on this tab here, web administrator password, we're going to change the password that we used to log into this just to make it a bit more secure. So type in a password there and confirm it, and then click save. And then what I like to do is, if you click this little drop down arrow here, is log out and say yes. And now just check, so the username is still admin, and just check now with your new password that that's took effect and you can indeed log back into the web interface, which is good. And then next up we're going to come over here to the network section and we're going to go to interfaces, and if you click on, I've only got the one network adapter in this machine, so that's there, so select your network adapter and then we're going to click edit, and you can see that at the moment it's getting its IP address automatically like we talked about through DHCP from the router. So we're going to change that from the drop down list to static, and I'm going to put the address in here, so 192.168.0.10 is the one I'm going to use, which is outside of my DHCP scope as we mentioned earlier. And the net mask, this needs to be 255.255.255.0, which is pretty well what I think just about every router on the market for homes uses. And then you need the gateway address, which is the IP address that we use to log into the router, which in my case is 192.168.0.1. and then if we scroll down the list a little bit, and IPv6 we don't need that, we can leave it disabled. And if we scroll down a bit further, the DNS servers, you can either use your ISP's DNS server by entering the IP address of your router again, or alternatively you could use a public DNS server like Google's, which would be 8.8.8.8 for example. So type whatever you'd sooner in there and then click save, and there we go. And all we need to do now at the top right here is click the apply button and say yes for those changes to take effect within openmediavault. Now because we've changed the IP address, that's just going to sit there. So what we need to do is now come up to the address bar and type in our new static IP address that obviously won't change. This will be the same moving forwards all of the time. So in my case that's 192.168.0.10, and if I press enter on that and click leave, and hopefully there we go, we're now back at our login screen for openmediavault. So we can log back in with our new password again, and here we go. That's it, we're logged back into openmediavault on our static IP address. Okay, so the time has come to configure our hard drives. So if we come down under storage and look at disks, you can see in here that we've got the two hard drives. There you go, 120 gig a piece here. It's also showing the USB drive that OMV is running on, so we don't want to touch that. So we've got the two drives here listed as devices SDB and SDC. So we're going to come down a bit lower under storage to RAID management, because if you remember, we're going to set them up in RAID 1. And so to do that, we're going to click this create button, and it wants a name for our RAID device, so I'm just going to call it data. And the level, by default, it's RAID 5, but we haven't got 3 or more hard drives in here, so we're going to go, as I said earlier, with the mirror option, which is RAID 1, and it's telling us obviously we need a minimum of 2 items are required to do this. So there's our 2 hard drives, so we can select each of those and click the create button and say yes to continue, and please wait until the RAID is initialized before creating a file system. So let's OK that and apply it, and yes. So as we can see, it's now syncing the 2 disks together, so they're exactly the same. It's at just 10% at the moment. I always think it's a good idea to let this proceed and complete at the 100% before continuing. So I'll pause the video and we'll come back when that's ready. Okay, if you see this screen at any point, don't panic. All it means is that openmediavault has just logged you out, which it does for security. So just click your mouse on it and it'll take you back to the login prompt to log back in. Right, so if we return to the RAID management section, we can now see that that process has completed and the 2 drives are now synced, so it tells us that the state is clean. So that's good. Now obviously the larger the hard drives that you've fitted to your NAS, the longer that process will have taken. You might have already noticed the capacity it's listing, the storage capacity, as just under the 120 gigabytes. Now obviously we put 2 120 gigabyte hard drives into this machine, and this is the biggest downside with RAID 1. Because the drives mirror or copy each other, you effectively lose one of them to something that is known as redundancy. In other words, you're always protected if one drive fails, because each one is a copy of the other, but the trade-off is that only half of the storage capacity is usable. So for this reason, some people prefer to use RAID 5, but that would require a minimum of 3 hard drives, and though it's not particularly difficult to set up, is beyond the scope of what we're covering here. So the next section, if we come down to file systems under storage, obviously now we've got our RAID array, we need to put a file system on it so that we can add data to the RAID. So if we click the create button, and under this top drop down box for device, you should see listed the software RAID that we've just configured. So there you go, RAID 1, just about 120 gigabytes of usable space. So let's give it a label. I'm just going to go for data for that. And the file system, you can choose whatever you like, but I'm going to keep it on ext4 because that's a good established Linux file system that works well, very reliable. So I'm going to leave it on that and click OK. And then it's going to tell us that obviously this is going to format the RAID, the device, both hard drives. So any data on there will be deleted. So if there's anything on those drives that you need to keep, make sure that you get it off before proceeding with this. And when you're happy to proceed, click yes. And there you go, it's creating the file system for us on the RAID 1 array. And that's it, the file system's been created successfully, so we can close that box. You can see it's just finishing up there, initializing, and now that's good. We can see that our file system with the labeled data and in the file system type ext4 has been created, and it's online ready for us to use. So now that the file system has been created, we just need to mount it. So if we highlight it, and then you can see up here we've got this mount button, so click on that, and we just need to click apply to that, and yes, and it'll save our changes again. Okay, so that's mounted and it should be, yep, ready to use. So while we've now got a usable file system on our NAS, we obviously need to share it so that we have a setup where a shared folder or more than one shared folder is accessible all over our home network. So if we come down to here under services to the SMB CIFS section, which are protocols, primarily Windows file sharing, and then enable that here on this toggle switch. We can leave it on the default work group and leave everything alone on there, and just click save, because that turns on that kind of file sharing, and just apply it and say yes. Now, while there are other types of sharing services available, SMB CIFS is a good one to use. As I say, it's primarily the Windows sharing service, but having said that, no matter what platform, whether it be Mac or obviously Windows or Linux, or even by using apps on Android or iOS, you can access this type of a share on virtually any device. So what we need to do now is come to our shared folders and actually set up a shared folder. So if we go to the add button and give it a name, so I'm just going to go with the highly original share, and then if we select a device, that's the data file system drive that we set up a moment ago, and it's given us a default path there. Now permissions, it's basically, if you click this drop down list, you've got a whole range of permissions. Now with openmediavault you can get very granular, so you could set up multiple user accounts and give them all sorts of different permissions, but for the sake of this video I'm going to keep things fairly straightforward. So rather than locking it down, I'm going to scroll down this list to the bottom, and we've got a permission for everyone to be able to read and write. So that'll allow anyone that connects to our NAS on our home network to be able to share files, videos, music, whatever they want. It just makes the setup a lot easier. So let's select that, and then you can add a comment if you want to, or just click the save button and then choose apply and say yes. Right, now although we've added that shared folder and you would reasonably think that was it, unfortunately there is an extra step which I don't think is the most intuitive, but in order to get our network share to work properly, we now need to come down to the SMB CIFS section, go up to this tab at the top called shares, and we need to actually add the share in here. So it's toggled there and enabled by default, so we need to click the drop down list and choose the shared folder, which at the moment there is only one. Obviously you could set up more shares if you wanted to, but we've just got the one share at the moment called share. So if I select that, you can add a comment if you want to. Now this public part is important. By default it's set to no for additional security, but because this is on the internal network, so a device would have to be connected to your home network in the first place to even access this, I'm not too bothered about that because it's relatively secure anyway. So on the drop down list I'm going to say guests allowed, just to make it nice and easy for anyone to connect. And by doing that, as we'll see shortly, when we try and connect from a client machine, another device, you'll be able to access it without providing any credentials, so we won't need to log in to access our share, which just makes it easier and simpler to use. So if we scroll down, you could set it read only if you wanted to put a bit of security on there, but then people wouldn't be able to put their files, folders and documents, share their videos and music and whatever else. It would just be read only for them to see what you've put on. Browsable, it's a good idea to leave that turned on, which basically means if, for example, they went into the network shares on Windows, it should detect them automatically, so they'll see any shares that you've created. Or if you wanted to hide it, you'd obviously turn that off. There's time machine support for Apple products. Access control lists, that's if you're getting really granular and looking down the security, creating users and groups, which, as I say, to keep things relatively straightforward, we're not going to bother here, but as time goes by and perhaps you do want to lock the device down a bit more, your NAS box, all those things are possible. There's more options here for permissions. You can turn on a recycle bin if you want to have a recycle bin on your network share, so that's where you do that here. By default it's going to hide dot files, which basically this is a Linux thing. In the Linux file system, if you put a dot in front of any file or folder, it will treat that file or folder as hidden. So this is going to respect that and hide dot files. And that's about all we need to concern ourselves with here. So when you're happy with your options, click the save button, and as always click the apply button and yes to apply and save the configuration changes. And congratulations, that's it. You have now successfully set up your first share in openmediavault. Right, so the NAS is almost ready to go, and we'll obviously test it and make sure that it's all working okay. But just before we do that, I just want to point out a couple of little things. So the first one on the left here is the date and time. If we click on there, in here you've got the option to use NTP or Network Time Protocol. What this allows us to do is to have openmediavault check with online database time servers what the accurate time is, because computers, when they're talking to each other, it causes far less problems if the times are close together or in sync. So what we can do here is, the first thing it wants us to do is to enter a time zone. Now, to find your time zone, if you don't already know what it is, if we open another web browser and we look for time zones database, and you can see this top entry here on Wikipedia, list of TZ time zone database time zones. If we click on that, and then it is quite a long list, so you could do a search up here in the page in Chrome, so find, and then I want London for Great Britain. So if I scroll through those entries and look here on the ones that are highlighted, we can see that the time zone is your continent usually, followed by the, well, in this case the capital city of the UK is the one for the United Kingdom. So Europe, London, that would be for me. You obviously search the list and find your correct time zone. You can double check here on the far left that it is definitely your time zone, because it tells us here GB for Great Britain, so find yours and make a note of it. Okay, so we can come out of that, and I'm going to enter that into here, Europe-London, and we can select that. So there we go, that's that bit, and then we need to toggle this switch to use an NTP server. And now that the region, or should I say the time zone, is set, we can click save and apply that, and yes. Right, so the next thing I wanted to briefly mention, if we look down the left hand side down the menu, you can see there's all sorts of things that we can configure, but I just want to show you this certificates section. If you look at the top of the browser up here, you'll probably notice that it says not secure, and that's just because by default openmediavault isn't using HTTPS encryption, it's just running on standard HTTP, the ordinary protocol, which is just plain text. If this was across the internet, that would be a really bad thing, but on your local network it's not really that necessary. You could create what they call a self-signed certificate and apply that within openmediavault. Then your browser would still complain because it's not from a reputable certificate authority. But with that, your connection would be encrypted. As I say, because we're just running this on our local home network, I don't personally think it matters that much, so I'd just leave it on the default settings. Right, next I just want to quickly mention down here on the left under System, you've got Update Management. So if we click on that, this is how you update the packages within OMV. So if we were to click this top box here, you can see it selects all of the updates in one go, and then literally we can just click on the install button and it's now going to go out there and look for all the updates and bring them in. Okay, and that's done that, so we can click the close button, and now as you can see all of the updated packages have disappeared because everything is now up to date. We can click the check button if we want to see if there's anything else that's new ready for updating, and no, we're right up to date now, so that's great. So it's a good idea periodically from time to time to just pop in here into the update management and just see if any new packages are available and keep the system up to date as you would do any other computer operating system. Obviously you can access this openmediavault web portal from practically any device that's connected to your home network through a web browser. And then here on the left under System, the last one, we've got plugins. Now plugins are a way to add additional functionality to openmediavault. Unfortunately the one we want isn't actually installed by default. It's not in the list, so we can't just select it. So what we need to do, if you open up a new tab on your web browser, and we're going to browse for OMV-extras, and if we click the link for that website, this is additional plugins that we can install. So if we click this link here to go to the guide and scroll down the list, because you can install it through the terminal, but just to keep things even simpler, we're going to do it through the web interface. So obviously we've installed OMV 5, so we want to download this plugin here, so I'm going to click that, and as we can see that's now downloading there. So if we minimize that out of the way, come to our downloads directory, and there we go, we can see we've got the OMV extras plugin. So if we now come back to our web browser, close that tab, and you can see here in the plugins section we've got the option to upload. So I'm going to click that and browse to my, let's just pull it over to my downloads directory and select the OMV extras plugin that we just downloaded. So I'm going to open that, and now I'm going to click OK, and it's uploading the OMV extras plugin. Right, so if we look over here on the left menu now, we've got this OMV extras section, and if we go to this one, extras repo, the extras repository, and toggle that on and save. Great, that's installed. So now if we come back over to the plugins section on the left, if we were to scroll down this list, you'll notice straight away there's a lot more plugins available to give us that extra functionality. So there's things like encryption for encrypting your hard disks, there's an antivirus plugin, all sorts of good stuff in there. Now the one that we want, I can come up to here and do a search. So I want the flash plugin. So if I type flash, we can see here we've got the openmediavault flash memory plugin. Now obviously we've installed OMV onto a USB stick, and USB sticks, or flash thumb drives as it says up here, as well as SD cards, aren't the best of media for constantly being written to. They tend to fail more often than a traditional hard drive. So this plugin is great for reducing the amount of temporary files and things that are put onto the USB stick. So in other words, it decreases the amount of writes that get put onto the OMV system on the USB stick, so thereby prolonging the life of that USB stick. So that's obviously a really good one to install. So if we tick that and click install and say yes, and that's going to install the flash memory OMV plugin for us. And there we are, that's done. So I can close that and OK. And there we go. Okay, so let's log out here of the OMV web interface and say yes, and we can close the web browser and the file explorer. Right, so it's test time. So in fact we need to close File Explorer because we're going to use that now. So to initially check we can access our shared folder, click in the bar at the top and type // and then the IP address of our NAS box, which in my case is 0.10, and then another / and then the name of the directory, which is mine is called share, and then I hit the enter key, and that's it. I'm now accessing my network share on my NAS from my Windows PC. So just like that, it's ready and waiting to be filled with data. Now if you recall, we also set it so that it should be browsable from the network directory. So if we click network here, by default Windows has got network discovery turned off. So what we want to do is click OK and then click this little bar at the top there and turn on network discovery and file sharing, because obviously we want to access things across our network from our computer. And then here we've got some options. So do you want to turn on network discovery and file sharing for all public networks? And you can say no, make the network that I'm connected to a private network, which is the most secure option, or yes, turn on network discovery and file sharing for all public networks, which I wouldn't recommend, particularly if this is a laptop and goes out of the house. So what's fine and more secure for us is the first option, no, make the network that I'm connected to a private network. So click that, and as you can see, it's found our OMV NAS box. So if I double click on that, we can now see it's got the share, that is our shared folder. So if we double click on that, that's it, we're inside that share again. And just as a test, if I create a new folder, what I like to do is make folders for various types of files. So I might have a music directory, I might make another new folder and call it videos, and I might have another one and call it documents. So obviously you can set up whatever you like, and then just as you would on your computer file system, you can start to put all sorts of files and documents and things within these. Right, now that's all well and good, and it's not the end of the world. I could come into network each time and OMV and share and access my documents, but it's still a little bit of a faff. So let's look at how we can get there more quickly. So if we come back to this PC and we click on the computer tab here, we can map a network drive. So if I click on that and do the map a network drive option, and we give it a drive letter, and I'm going to just choose S for share, and then that folder address is what we browsed for in File Explorer earlier. So it's / 192.168.0.10, which is the static IP address we set on the, or I set in this case on the NAS box. You put whatever you set on yours, / and the name of the shared folder, which I just called share, to put whatever you called yours, and then leave this on reconnect at sign in so it automatically connects each time, and then just click finish, and there you go, it's brought that up. And if I was to close these File Explorer boxes and relaunch it, now each time if I come into this PC, I've got this network share. straight away accessible there, and I can even, if I want, go one better than that. And if I grab this little drive icon here and drag it onto the desktop and let go, that's actually created me a shortcut to the same place. So you could leave it like that, but that to me looks a little bit messy, so I'm going to rename that and just call it share. And now if I double click that, it literally takes me into my shared NAS folder straight from the desktop. So let's see how it performs, shall we? I've put some content into, if I go into this PC, I've got some music, pictures and videos. So if I go to music first, and I'm going to select that and do Control C to copy. So let's make this process even easier. What we can do, if I go back to this PC and right click on the network share, I can pin it to the quick access. So now we've got it here as well. So with that music one, if I copy that and then go to the share, and then if I go to music on there and Control V to paste, that puts that in there. And then I can do the same thing for the others. So if I go to videos, I can Control C on there to copy it, go to the share, to videos, Control V on the keyboard to paste. And then if we go back to this PC and I've got some pictures, so let's take the portable apps one and the secure backup, and if you hold down your control key while you on the keyboard while you single left click your mouse on each one, that will highlight them, and then you can press Control C on the keyboard again to copy. And if we come back to our share, I didn't actually do a pictures one, so let's create a pictures folder now. So let's keep it consistent with capitals, and if we go into there, and then I can do Control V on the keyboard to paste. And then the final bit of proof, just to make sure it all works, if we go into our share and let's start in music, if I double click that, there we go, it's playing in our media player. Close that, go back to share, go to pictures, let's double click portable apps, and there's a photo, one of mine, fancy seeing that in here, and a secure backup photo from another video. And if we go back to share again and videos, hello and welcome to Bite My Pie, one of my previous channel videos. Where we sync up. And there we go, we can close that. So let's close out of that. So we copied the files from our local computer onto the NAS and then accessed them from the local computer on the NAS and viewed the photos, listened to the music and watched the video, all on our local PC but stored on the network attached storage. So obviously the beauty of that is that it could be any device practically that you owned connecting into that NAS from anywhere around the home and accessing that same content. Right, well that's all well and good. We can now access our NAS from Windows, but what about mobile, smartphones and tablets? Well, on Android we've got the File Manager app available in the Play Store by the developer Flashlight and Clock, which supports SMB shares and works well. And then on the iOS side of things, in the Apple App Store we've got the FE File Explorer File Manager app by the developer Skyjoes Co Limited, which also supports Windows file sharing. That nearly brings us to the end of this video. Despite my best efforts, it's still turned into a bit of a marathon, so thanks for sticking with me if you've made it this far. As you've probably gathered by now, openmediavault supports way more functionality than what we've covered in this video, but the purpose of what we've done here is just to introduce you to the NAS and to hopefully get you up and running for basic file sharing. We delved briefly into the plugins in openmediavault, but the platform also has support for Docker, which is working with containers, and it also supports virtualization through the likes of VirtualBox. If you were considering using openmediavault for these purposes, you'd obviously want to put more RAM into the system and probably go for a more powerful CPU, as something like an Intel Atom, a low powered processor, would really struggle in that regard. The downside of that is that a more powerful processor is going to use more electric, and as a NAS is ideally going to be on all the time, that's going to be a consideration as well. But at least hopefully now you've picked up enough information to get you started on your journey into using the fantastic free software that is openmediavault. And that's it. So of course you could just go out and buy a ready-made NAS. Synology and QNAP make some pretty decent models, but where's the fun in that? Additionally, not only can building your own NAS save you a few pennies, you'll also have a better understanding of how it actually works. So whatever route you take, enjoy the benefits of having your new network attached storage. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified when I post the next one, just click the bell icon. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.